Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is February 6, 2021, and this is a video following up on a few videos I've made recently about the prospect of a grand left-right alliance. I made a couple of videos about the subject and speaking against it because, or speaking against the pursuit of it, because recently YouTube personality, comedy news guy Jimmy Dore, formerly of the Young Turks, had a guy on his show, went by the name of Magnus Panvidya, used to go by the name of Zachary Clark, from the Boogaloo Boys, right-wing libertarian, that would be USA-style libertarian, Ayn Rand type libertarian, guy on his show and talking about, oh, we can work with these people, they're pro-LGBT. Yeah, so are the Democrats. Anyway, this kind of stirred up for a lot of people the prospect of a grand left-right alliance. And I want it to be super clear that is one of the worst ideas possible. I know the socialist movement is small. I know it's painfully small. But we're not going to do ourselves any favors by aligning with people whose aims are directly opposite of ours. Libertarians, let me remind you, and I did a video on this a while ago, want to privatize everything. Like the whole arc of neoliberalism from the last 40 years, that's what they want. They want to defund, deregulate, and privatize. So this hit home for me personally because I have been in movements before. Jimmy Dore has not. He is on a YouTube channel. He has not been out actually doing activism in the real world, working with parties. He sits in his $1 million garage in Los Angeles making YouTube videos. He is not an activist. He has good ideas sometimes. I supported Force the Vote, but he is not a socialist. He is definitely not a communist. He is not a Marxist at all. Just because he's better than Cenk Uygur doesn't make him a socialist. He is not a socialist. He had Howie Hawkins of the Green Party on his show recently, before the 2020 election, and was incredibly rude and dismissive because Jimmy, and he didn't say this is why, but Jimmy is all about the movement for a People's Party, which I put a thing on the screen here. Howie Hawkins has talked to Nick Brana of the Movement for a People's Party, and they said the Greens are too socialistic, too far left. So I don't really get it how socialists think this is like this grand strategy. Now, should we talk to right-wingers? It's 2021. There's the internet. Everybody talks to everybody. You can't not talk to right-wingers. I wouldn't, even if I wanted that, which I don't, I wouldn't be able to do it. Nobody can make that happen. There's the internet. But you have to ask yourself, why are people still right-wingers in 2021 when there is the internet? It's a choice. It's a choice. Yeah, there's cultural pressures and there's family pressures and there's all that stuff. But bottom line, I put at least an hour a day, every day, into running Socialism for All, putting educational materials, audiobooks, history, and analysis online so that anyone can access them. You don't have to be this left wing to read Marxists.org. You don't have to be this left wing to listen to a Socialism for All video. It's online. It's for everyone. And it's free. You don't need money either. But for some reason, it's the left's fault when there's too many right-wingers. Because right-wingers decide to stay ignorant. Or they decide to align with the capitalist class. Newsflash, that's not our fault. It's a problem. And yeah, we should be persuasive and we should put our propaganda and our messaging out there. Propaganda has a negative connotation now, but originally it was a very neutral term. It just meant materials you put out to propagate a worldview or an idea. We should put it out there. That's why I'm running this channel. But it's not my fault that capitalism exists. It's not my fault that right-wingers are right-wingers. It's not my fault that the Koch brothers and the Libertarian Party, along with, other reactionary segments of the ruling class, have been pushing neoliberalism for a long time and have gained a lot of traction with it. That's not my fault. It's also not the solution to our problems. So with that as preface, let's get into some comments that people have sent into S4A, and let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. I think that people mostly are in good faith and trying to actively, promote and spread socialism. But libertarians, don't waste your time with them. They might as well have like a casing, 2-inch thick casing of steel around their heads. It's like impenetrable, okay? We agitate, we educate, we organize people who are interested. But you can't just say, we're going to target the right now. Yeah, and it's going to work. No, it won't. Like, why would you even say that? The reason Jimmy Dore is saying it is he's not that left wing. So he wants to work with libertarians. Also, he's living in a $1.2 million house that he has to pay for using YouTube money. Okay? I don't. I'm assuming most of you don't. He has a show with 850,000 subs. When he does a live stream, people throw super chats of like thousands of dollars at him every time he goes on air. It's at least many hundreds. I don't know if it's thousands every time, but it probably is thousands every time he does a stream. I'm not doing this commercially. He needs to get those numbers up. How do you get those numbers up? The socialist left isn't that big. You go for libertarians. You go for people who you can say, look, they're outside the status quo. They don't like the duopoly. The duopoly, yeah, it's a thing, but really the capitalist class and the capitalist system, that's the real thing. And guess what? Libertarians aren't outside of that. They want capitalism. They will fight for it harder than anyone. But they have this weird idealism that you can have capitalism without empire and capitalism without a police state. You can, I think, hear the sirens. I live on a busy street. You can have that. You can't have it. And in fact, the more we go into neoliberalism, you just get this austerity dystopia nightmare. Well, that's what libertarians are going for. They just don't like the consequences of capitalism. So they call it socialism. So in fact, they're using us as a scapegoat. And you think we can work with them? You can't. This is let alone all the racist stuff and kind of crypto-fash nationalist stuff that got mixed in with the whole libertarian side of the spectrum, the far right. All right, I promised comments. Let's get into some comments. And I have trimmed out names and in some cases preceding comments, but I think that all of these are pretty clear. Many of these people are just misguided. Some on the left want to just call them names and push them into the arms of the next fascist demagogue. Let me pause right there. This is why Trump won, guys, because the left did one thing I didn't like. No, like I said before, this isn't our fault. There's only so much we can water down our message without embracing right-wing politics. That's a fact. You can only water it down so far. You can only make it so palatable. You can only dump so much sugar and salt on top before it's just unhealthy, Trying to keep things left-wing to people who don't want to accept left-wing things, there is a limit. I'm sorry. Ultimately, this does come down to right-wingers' willingness to listen and change their minds. In some cases, that willingness is like zero. That's not our fault. All right. Many of these people on the right are just misguided. Some on the left want to just call them names and push them into the arms of the next fascist demagogue. No one on the left wants to push anyone into the arms of a fascist demagogue. That's not how it works. That's not what we want. So, off the bat, this is kind of a bad faith comment, but let's continue. Push them into the arms of the next fascist demagogue that comes along, while others on the left want to reach out to them and try to get them on the right path and fight the actual people who have made their lives miserable. Actually, I think everyone wants that. The question is, some of us, like me, have been doing this long enough that you see that works maybe 5% of the time, and that other groups tend to be more receptive. We should be working with anti-racist movements that may be more liberal in orientation because they've at least got the anti-racist part. We should be working with feminist groups because they at least get the women's liberation part. When you try to work with people who want hyper-deregulated capitalism, there's very little common ground. And the points of unity that they have been trying to make, like the Jimmy Dore thing, is like that they're anti-war. We're going to get into more detail on that. I have found very few libertarians know what the hell they're talking about. They oppose war in an abstract sense. They can't understand that capitalism requires war. And when I say can't understand, I mean can't understand. I've seen it explained up, down, and sideways. It doesn't land. So at a certain point, like I've been doing this for about 15 years in like a pretty full-time way. After a while, you just see the trend that like in general, this is kind of a waste of time. I'm not going on to, whatever social media that you're on, and I'm not trying to interfere in your conversations. If I see somebody trying to talk some sense in a right-winger, I'll contribute. But I think trying to make this a priority is a stupid idea. All right, let's go on with the comment. Try to get them on the right path and fight the actual people who've made their lives miserable. Yeah, that's what we want. I grew up very right-wing and somewhat racist, and it wasn't people calling me names that changed me. It was a socialist who was very nice and understanding of my problems who convinced me to change. Well, that's good for you. First of all, I'd like to give you credit that you grew up socialized into a right-wing racist environment, and you at some point recognized it was wrong. Give yourself some credit. Guess what? Not every right-winger is willing to do that. Not everyone has the courage to change. Not everyone has the capacity to reflect on their own views and realize that they are changeable. Like there's so many levels to this. I think it was not just the socialist who reached out to you who did that. I think it was a long process in your life, both conscious and unconscious. Because if you look at, there's a theory in psychology, stages of change. There is a big part of change that is pre-contemplative. Before you're even aware that you're thinking about changing, you are thinking about changing. So credit to you. A lot of people don't go through that. And I think you're giving too much credit to the socialist. Now, they may have been like the key catalyst at the particular moment that you were ready for it. But I would also be willing to guess that there were other moments that were just as nice and understanding, or could have affected somebody else in the same way that you eventually were, but that you weren't ready for yet, and that when you encountered them the first time, you dismissed them. That's not their fault. And it's not necessarily your fault personally, but that's the way you were raised, that's what you were taught, and you weren't ready to change that at that point in time. I'm glad that you changed. And yeah, this also brings up the topic of when socialists talk to other socialists, we need to call fascism fascism. Libertarian is crypto-fascism, period. Because it has all these weird idealist notions about no war and everybody's going to be treated fairly. And then they advocate a system that is pure, unadulterated, unremediated exploitation. Now, you would think it would be fairly easy to like snap people out of that because it's so absurd. But this isn't an entirely rational process. People are not entirely rational decision makers. And my belief is that a lot of, very far right stuff, a lot of fascist thinking is deliberately irrational. There's like a willful ignorance involved. There's like, they almost champion it, and you can kind of see it in the MAGA movement, where it's like the more reality they strike down as fake news or whatever, like the stronger they believe. And actually, now that I say that out loud, I think it's no mistake or no coincidence that the right-wing targeted evangelists, because you can get them to believe anything, and they believe it on faith, not facts. These are not people with great critical thinking skills, which is kind of something you need to get into the realm of rational discourse, debate, considering facts, turning concepts over rationally in your mind. That's not how religion works. And if you can basically, just marry reactionary politics to religion, you can kind of marry progressive values to religion as well. Although it tends to be kind of more like secular humanist, like, just a moral code without some of the more, faith-based, superstitious kind of things. But the point here is that we have a right wing, particularly in the United States, that is kind of psychotically irrational. So, again, just putting it on socialists that, you couldn't snap someone out of your psychosis by talking sense to them, yeah, that's not your fault. It's really not. We're up against really horrible odds and very heavy oppression. These people have been brainwashed. I mean, they have been filled up with lies and then taught how not to think. I've been around conservative people, like deeply far-right religious conservative people. We're going to get into that a little bit more in another comment, so I'll kind of save it there. But so for this commenter, first of all, let's tell the difference between when socialists talk to other people on the left about the right, and then when we talk to people on the right. There's a difference there. Yes, we try to be more persuasive when we're talking to an individual right-wing person who is embracing capitalist. Maybe they're even working class, yet they're embracing a ruling class capitalist ideology. Yeah, we try to be persuasive, but there's only so many minutes in the day, and again, if you've been doing this like I have pretty concertedly for about 15 years, you just realize at a certain point, like, a lot of these people are never going to be convinced, and you try to use your time on what's going to work. I'm not saying abandon these people entirely, but also coddling, lavishing all this attention on people who are literally going to spit in your face or worse. There's honestly better uses of our time, Like I said, it's 2021. Nothing is stopping people from accessing for free all kinds of information about socialism. And really, this is a Marxist channel that we're running here at Socialism for All. There's all kinds of like lighter versions of it for whatever somebody's ready for. We found, for example, that the Bernie Sanders campaign was a big joining point. That was what people were ready to hear. Not all of them became Marxist. Some did. But that pulled some people out of being deeply right-wing to just centrist, social democratic, whatever you want to call the Bernie thing. For me, the dividing line of the political spectrum is the left side is socialist, the right side is capitalist. The Bernie Sanders thing was kind of right around the center. Bernie himself, I think, is right of center. There were definitely people in that coalition who were left of center, like actual socialists supporting Bernie as a big step left. We're not here to rehash that entire discussion today, just to point out that there are many, 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 many different access points for somebody who's currently right-wing and questioning it to get out of the right wing. Factor in social pressures too, because, we hear a lot about, Thanksgiving dinners and other family gatherings where people have huge fallings out with their family over politics. This is a real thing. It becomes intolerable at a point. So, again, no, I think that this is a straw man of like some on the left just want to call them names and push them into the arms. No one wants to push anyone into the arms of the next fascist demagogue. It's just some of us, we do reach out, but some of us know a lot of them are going to go into the arms of the next fascist demagogue because no matter what we say, it won't influence those people enough not to do that. Not our fault. Billionaires are spending loads of money putting the Charlie Kirks and the Ben Shapiros and the Candace Owenses and every other piece of capitalist messaging out there. Don't blame the victim. All right, let's move on to the next comment. We have kind of a similar one. I think it's important to have a dialogue with the right wing, but not as a means to collaborate so much as win them over. We were just talking about that. Many of them could be socialists if given the chance. I'm sorry, did I deny someone their socialism permit? They have the chance. We don't have to give them the chance. That's a very strange statement. And even if not, we can still organize with them in meat space into doing some effective actions. Like, for example, many conservatives are pro-expanding Medicaid, raising wages, and bringing our troops home. We could certainly work with them on that. My policy is unite on issues that we agree on, then struggle with them where we disagree. Okay. So, again, on the many of them could be socialists if given the chance. Like I said, who is giving them this chance? You know, why is the onus put on us to correct their behavior when we live in a world where people are just drowning in information? We, as socialists, need to clearly articulate socialism. It's like when Jimmy Dore had the guy, Jerome White from the Socialist Equality Party and World Socialist website on right after Magnus Panvidya, and Jerry, objected and just, wanted to lodge a comment. He didn't want to appear without comment after Magnus Panvidya, right-wing militia guy. He just wanted to say, hey, I object to that. Now let's talk about the other thing. And Jimmy couldn't let it go. And he actually accused Jerry White of not offering that guy a vision. Excuse me? They literally run the World Socialist website. They literally have a political party, the Socialist Equality Party, that offers a vision. I mean, that's what they do. This is blaming the victim and trying to start a narrative of excluding the far left and blaming us for our own persecution. There is a history in the United States of intense anti-communist suppression, murder, police violence, deportation, you name it. Go back to the first Red Scare. They just threw immigrants on boats that were suspected of being anarchists or communists or just unionists. And they would literally just throw people on boats and ship them back to Europe. No questions asked. It was intense. That, continued to some extent through World War II, and then you got came to a head again with McCarthyism. Intense. Socialists got driven out of every public institution that existed. There's a few hanging on in academia, but by and large, there just aren't institutions for socialists to be active in. We're starting to get set up on the internet again now, and that's actually been going pretty well. It's why we're having this conversation today at all. But trying to tell people, my point in bringing up the Jerry White, Jimmy Dore example is Jimmy Dore has a guy on his site who he knows damn well, they're talking about it, runs the World Socialist website and a socialist, actual Marxist, they're Trotskyist, but it's Marxist political party. And he accuses that guy completely disingenuously of not offering workers a vision. Give me a break. But that's how anti-communists are willing to play. They're willing to be that disingenuous. They're willing to blame us for being as marginalized as we are when we're up against the most brutal capitalist class in history in the United States. U.S. capitalists are unusually brutal compared to most other capitalist classes. It's one of the most brutal in the world. So don't put it on us. Are they not capable of being right-wingers without us? Like without our personal attention, approval? Do we have to change their diapers? I didn't become a socialist because of that. I got exposed to Marx late in high school by a teacher. Some of the ideas landed. I didn't become like a complete Marxist. I didn't start reading everything at that point. It jolted me enough not to believe in the system. But beyond that point, it didn't land as deeply. I did that myself later on. And I did it by accessing materials put out by other socialists, older socialists who had come before me. That's exactly what we're doing here at Socialism for All. Ultimately, you can't change someone else's mind. People change their own minds. I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. Now, yes, one point I will agree on that I don't think actually has been articulated clearly, but would be a better point of criticism if I was going to criticize somebody for the way that they're interacting with right-wingers and for the dialogue. And this is not to say that I see this a lot, so I don't want to make this big straw man, but theoretically or hypothetically, you know what I think would not be good is to persecute someone for past affiliation with the right. If people are willing to renounce it and genuinely spend a few years becoming a concerted socialist, and they're not just like a plant or something like that, I'm willing to accept that. What I'm not willing to accept is, just unfiltered right-wingers. Hey, let's have this movement, You hate some stuff, I hate some stuff. Let's have, this movement. That's not going to work. It's really not going to work. That's horseshoe theory is what that is. But saying, oh, you used to be right-wing, but now you're sincerely left-wing. Great. I would be against, excluding that person because they used to be right-wing. I think that would be very negative. I think that would be the conversation we should have if people were even doing that. I've spent a lot of time running S4A and doing other social media. I don't see a ton of that, to be honest. So I think actually the actual situation we see with socialists is we're very happy to have people join our ranks. Yes, there are people who come into Marxism who bear too much baggage from the right-wing oppressive culture that we've been raised with, whether that's lingering racist views, lingering sexist views, lingering heterosexist views, whatever it is. And we need to work on that because this is not a purely economically oriented movement. You're not going to have a real workers' liberation without also lifting up those other oppressions. So, yeah, we do need to work on that with former right-wingers. I mean, I would count everyone raised in the United States basically as a former right-winger. We're raised into a deeply right-wing culture. We need to help each other decolonize our minds, and we do. But when people reject and refuse it, yeah, I mean, we should explain to them, hey, you're rejecting and refusing it. I've seen that with people who claim right now to be some of the most devout Marxist-Leninists there are. They're like, I'm the biggest badass. I know it all. I'm the best Marxist. You all are just rad libs. And they're spouting views that are deeply tainted by a racist, sexist, heterosexist, etc. culture. You're not there yet. So we all need to self-crit, and we all need to help each other realize that we're coming out of a culture that put 1,000 landmines into our brains. It takes years. It took me years. Before I got to a point where I wasn't almost every day having a realization of wow, I was really trained to be very casually racist. I was trained to be really very casually sexist. And without very focused overturning of that and introspection on that, I would just be I would not be able to see society for what it is. I wouldn't be able to see people in the working class for the people who they are. And it took a really fucking long time because, I was socialized to be an oppressor. There's no other way to say it. I mean, I was socialized into that culture. I was expected to pick up that mantle when I became an adult. So were we all. And no matter what it is, the system tries to sell us on whatever it can get us to take on to perpetuate itself. And it's insidious. It takes so many different forms. It really, we need to be open to this idea that we're not there enough yet. Maybe that's why we haven't had a revolution in this country. Maybe that's why we're so far behind in so many ways. We have the weight of the most oppressive capitalist class in the world bearing down on us. It's the one that bears down on all the other countries and puts the most muscle on them and is willing to kill and torture people in all the other countries. That's the one sitting on our heads. And it's trying to get us to be part of that system. So this idea that we socialists can snap our fingers and just get people out of that, we can't even do that to ourselves. It takes a lot of time. For some of us who were raised by Marxists, hopefully you got off on a better footing, got off to a better start. But even, being exposed to mass media, it's insidious. And they just try to slip it in everywhere. And it's just really hard to undo that. Again, I'm coming back to here, don't blame the victim. And yes, I think that we should be understanding of people wherever they're coming from, if they're sincere about undoing this stuff. But that also means not giving people leadership positions or letting them just spout off whatever it is if it's wrong, if it's ignorant. Because you're going to drive out other people from the movement. People are so fucking obsessed about what will the right-wingers think? How do we get more right-wing Christian militiamen into our movement? What will they think? How about what are the people who have been here the whole time, who've been fighting for survival? What will they think? So I think there's a real disconnect there. And I see a lot of very online Marxist-Leninists. A lot of times they're very young also. Keep it in check, because I don't think you're seeing all the pieces here. We need to help each other. And you may not be all the way there yet yourself. It's not a stinginess on the part of existing socialists willing to help people. Although, yeah, there'll be days when I just can't deal with it anymore online. I've already helped my 3 or 4 people. I've already calmly and patiently explained to 3 or 4 right-wingers why they're wrong. I'm a human being, though, and after that 3rd or 4th person, I'm just I'm done. I'm done. We're human beings. We're not saints and martyrs. We're not Jesus Christ, bestowing salvation onto people. That's just not how it works. We're out here in the real world trying to fix real problems. And there is a limit. It's not our fault. Recognize what we're up against, cut ourselves some slack. And for people who are making a sincere commitment, cut them some slack. But part of getting into this movement means realizing that you have a lot of hidden, disturbing things about our culture, about the system, that have laid eggs in you. And that's a disturbing and horrifying realization, too, that you have had these, things in you. And that taking them out, it's not that simple of a process. And it may cause you to rethink your life, rethink your choices, to view actions that you've taken in the past in a different light. And, that path to rehabilitation from capitalist socialization, it's a hard one because it really does try to make us all complicit in its crimes in some way. And it can be hard to face that within us. And it can be a lot easier to just say, fuck it, I'm not going to have those unsettling realizations. I'm just going to stay on the path I'm on, of just being kind of right-wing. And there can be a lot of ego because people want to be good activists. They want to be, good socialists. But it really does come from within, and from that process of education, self-crit, and overturning all the things that our very sophisticated capitalist oppressors have put into our heads from a very early age. Okay, so again, we don't bend over backwards and take responsibility for those who choose to make themselves our enemies, while also understanding that making the choice to become an ally is not as simple as simply declaring it, and we need to make that clear to people who are sincere. And the last comment that I was talking about of, this is why Trump won, guys, that meme of like, this is why Trump won, a lot of times was because that would come up when oftentimes some white guy would say, well, I ally with you on XYZ issues, but you're going too far on XYZ other issue. This is why Trump won, because the left's too pure or whatever. No, the fact is that capitalism's that pervasive, and like everything you know about society is wrong. Meaning this goes a lot deeper than just declaring yourself, I'm a socialist now because I got one or two of the ideas. No, maybe you've started, and we have a place in the movement for people who have just started. But you have just started. I hope that makes sense. Okay. On the other comment about Medicare for All and working with people on some issues, I'll just read you what I wrote back. As for the Medicare for All coalitions, yes, 70% of people in the USA support Medicare for All. So it's definitely not a socialist-only issue. Ironically, though, libertarians probably make up most of that 30% of there's not 30% libertarians in this country, but I'm pretty sure most of the libertarians are in that 30% of people who are least likely to support it. They think that the free market is going to lower prices and we need more interstate competition and all that nonsense. That is now basically mainstream Republican Party messaging. Libertarians are probably like one of the least represented groups in the 70% of people in the USA who want Medicare for All. Now, this does raise a larger question about how do socialists work in coalitions that also include non-socialists? Okay, just ask anyone who has been doing that for a while. It's not that complicated. There are issues that you can support either as a capitalist or as a socialist. You can support Medicare for All from a capitalist perspective because it's more efficient. It saves money. You have a healthier workforce, etc. Like, it's literally better for capitalists. We're in this weird thing of neoliberalism, which is basically libertarianism now, where it's this like ultra short-term thinking. They just want to raid and do austerity and dig this deeper and deeper and deeper hole. For all the talk of kicking the can down the road that conservatives love to pull, they're really kicking the can down the road in the sense of digging this austerity hole that austerity doesn't work in the way that the Austrian economists of the libertarian school like to think it does. It's not as simple as a kitchen table discussion. The U.S. can print its own money, very much unlike a family sitting around a kitchen table figuring out their budget. Medicare for All, you can support it as a socialist because it's a step away from a privatized system. You can support it as a capitalist because it's literally more efficient than the private, free-for-all market. That's great. You know what I mean? Like, that is one of the easier tasks that we have as socialists. I don't actually see a problem there. When positions that socialists advocate are popular, that I think shows that society is progressing towards seeing the need for what we have been saying. We may be a little bit further seeing and further thinking than a lot of people who don't spend time analyzing the motivating forces of history, as Marxists do. We tend to see things in terms of centuries. Other people see things in terms of maybe decades or years, and then somewhat inaccurately at that. That's why we adhere to Marxism, because it gives you predictive and explanatory power of, the development of society. So we're able to, when we put a position out that becomes popular, that's just a win. Just take the win. But yeah, I actually don't think Medicare for All is like actually a left-right unity issue in terms of libertarians. Like, it's just that working class Republicans now see it as a thing. There's no problem here. Like, trying to make this dichotomy of like, we'll never work with a right-winger on anything. No. I'm saying don't bring people into the socialist movement who like are deeply opposed to it. But if there's a single issue, whatever. This also gets back into what I was saying before about the grand left-right alliance that Jimmy Dore and Movement for a People's Party are kind of pushing. This like horseshoe theory movement that like the far left and the far right, it just curves back around, man. We're like closer than you think. No, we're not. No, we're really not. And thinking that we're going to have this running coalition is astoundingly wrong. We're going to disagree on much more than we agree on. I mean, it literally makes less sense to work with them, despite agreement on a few issues, like 2 or 3 issues, on a running basis than it would to work with almost anyone else in terms of being able to persuade and get momentum going. So, yeah. Well, let's keep going. So, my next comment replied to working on other issues. So I'll just read my comment. About working with conservatives on other one-off issues like a minimum wage raise. This is not a question for socialists to decide unilaterally, as when such campaigns happen, various interest groups just show up and start working in favor of it. If they're willing to work on shared goals, and we're not compromising ourselves as socialists and pursuing a goal, like, in other words, it's genuinely something we wanted to do, then generally that would mean that the working class is ready for whatever we've been advocating. So that's a good sign. This is what I was just saying. The main thing to watch out for is when people propose a grand and general alliance between progressives and libertarians, as in the proposed Movement for a People's Party, the way it's been shaping up so far. That is the main thing I've been trying to get at in these videos. All you really get in a left-right populist alliance. Because remember, right-wing populists, these are the anti-maskers. That Magnus Panvidya guy was showing up for the reopen protests. Not for Medicare for All protests. Just reopen the fucking businesses with everyone unprotected. Not UBI protests. They picked their goal, and they picked it for a reason. All you really get and it's not just because they're confused. Believe me. If you really sincerely think that, you have not spent enough time around libertarians. Please refrain from comment. All you really get in a left-right populist alliance, i.e. a general, enduring, multi-purpose one, is the sleazy libertarians compromising and co-opting the whole thing on behalf of capital, stepping on the left's head, and using us to further their ends as soon as they get the chance. These goals ultimately include our extinction. They are anti-communist. So it's basically the ultimate in opportunism for us to engage in that. People will rail about working with the squad or dingists or whatever due to concerns about opportunism and revisionism. But somehow they can look right past right-wing militias who want Mad Max, deregulated, hyper-capitalist dystopias. It almost sounds like shared nationality or shared race or shared gender is trumping the obvious conflict in class interests there. I stand by that because when you really get down at the end to like, why did Jimmy Dore have this right-wing militia guy on and why didn't he have on? And not just that day, but over the last 5 years. Why did Jimmy Dore not have on more socialists? It's priorities. It's points of unity being things other than wanting socialism. Had another comment here about working with libertarians in actions like anti-war demonstrations. So my response to that was the question of working with libertarians in coalitions, for example, anti-war coalitions. This is not an entirely abstract question. I personally have been a participant in the planning of anti-war events in coalitions that involved libertarians, and everyone else was on the left. Libertarians, let me explain something else for people who don't know libertarians. They think that they are neither left nor right. They are far right, and they believe that they are neither left nor right. They are these weird capitalist idealists that have this ideology that is like completely divorced from the material consequences of what they're promoting. And they're like 7 or 8 degrees separated from reality. I mean, there's not really another way to say it. Trying to reason with them is hard. They think they're not right wing, but they're deeply right wing. So that's like off the bat. They genuinely think they have transcended left and right, saying things like, it's not about left and right, it's about top and bottom. Literally, third positionism, fascism, the original fascism, had a similar claim that they weren't left or right. It's concerning. It's concerning. And then what did they do in practice? Deeply reactionary. Because people that, they love to call everyone else economically illiterate. They are totally and utterly politically and historically illiterate, as well as economically illiterate. But they don't even understand where their ideology falls in relationship with other ideologies. There is a real libertarian to fascist pipeline that's been written about many times. It's not my pet theory. I've seen it in practice. So everyone else in these anti-war groups was on the left. And then you get these few random weirdo libertarians showing up who don't understand anything. And they think that they can promote capitalism under the guise of being anti-war is pretty much what it comes down to. Because when you argue with them on anything else, they just sound like a standard Republican, just co-opting a few left talking points. That's basically the Republican Party is so far right now. They're basically like libertarians in many ways, just without the civil rights part. But economically, it's just full on neoliberals, and many Democrats are there too. This whole socially liberal and fiscally conservative, doesn't that describe the Democratic Party for the most part? I mean, libertarians have won and they don't like it. Libertarianism is neoliberalism, yet they hate neoliberalism, like the working class ones. It's never enough because they don't actually understand what they're advocating. So when they get the consequences of it, they just blame it on they blame it on us, even though we have no power at all. They blame it on us. So they're fucking weird to work with. So everyone else was on the left and they were very wary of the libertarians and kept them on a short leash. If you're going to work with them at all on any single issues, that is the way to do it. Understanding that the more overall power you give them, the more it will come back on you eventually, since they completely oppose our overall vision of society. Opportunism has never applied more fully than to working with libertarians. It must be handled with extreme care, as 99% of their messaging goes against everything that we stand for on the left. It is far better for the left itself to learn to work together. Trotskyists, Stalinists, Maoists, Dengists, all of us, we need to work together, and then we won't have to think about this so much because our movement will be less splintered, less fractured. I know this is asking a lot, and I'm not thinking we're going to overcome 100% of our differences, but we need to be a lot more tolerant of each other. And I know that groups within even just those 4 factions I just mentioned have real, legitimate grievances. We need to work together to resolve those real, legitimate grievances so that there is an overall sense of justice within the movement. And yeah, I know some people are, spies and plants that deliberately splinter off and try to weaken us. I mean, we got to be aware of that. That's not anything new. We've got to account for that in our movements. But turning our backs on other socialists and instead embracing the right, literally, it's like, oh, this road is too bumpy. I'll just drive headfirst into a wall. That'll be better. No, it really won't. It really won't. Well, I got off the road, didn't I? Yeah, but now you're dead. So we have a lot more in common with each other than we have with libertarians and should absolutely exhaust all left avenues before approaching a partnership with a libertarian, even on a single issue, wherever it can be avoided. However, like I said, when like a minimum wage campaign breaks out, which incidentally, libertarians are opposed to any minimum wage. But so again, that's not an issue you're going to be working with libertarians on. It's just not. Also, for all the talk of being anti-racist and pro-LGBT, it's a pretty white movement by and large. There's black Republicans, there's gay Republicans, a few. It's the same with libertarians. Maybe it's a little bit more diverse. But again, these people trying to pin them down on a consistent ideology. I mean, I'm talking mostly to Marxists here, to socialists on this channel. You know what it's like even talking with left anarchists. It's like the positions tend to be all over the place, not super consistent, because anarchism, my belief is why I'm a Marxist, anarchism just is too diffuse and not a sufficiently predictive. It doesn't really get at most of the fundamental driving forces in society. They are arguably a little bit ahead on some like gender issues and some other things. But when it comes to the driving force of history, it's not hierarchy. It's not just the state. It's historical materialism. But so my point is, what talking to left anarchists is like. Now try talking to people who think they're, quote, right-wing anarchists. I mean, just to think that, it's a contradiction in terms. It's an extreme oxymoron. Yet to them, it's like totally fine. It's doublethink. I mean, it's like, it's the old thing of holding two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and not having a problem with it. That's libertarians. This is neoliberal libertarianism. So why are we going and seeking these people out? Unless you invest in horseshoe theory, it's a super bad idea. If libertarians show up at your coalition, whatever it is, expect them to be expect that their motives are to be there to co-opt, weaken, and undermine, to prop themselves up. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. They are trying to promote and completely undermine any steps towards socialism or even social democracy. They want unregulated capitalism. Just go watch the second Mad Max movie. That is the logical consequence of libertarianism. Really, it's a horrible, horrible nightmare. If they show up, expect something sneaky. If you get them to do something good, tremendous. But literally, they more often than not tend to be a liability who are just trying to co-opt you on the left. You think, and this is, before we go on to the next comment, I want to get into something else. If it sounds like I'm going on here for a long time, it's because literally I don't know why people are even considering this thought. I have a million reasons why this is a bad idea. Here's another one. Recently, many socialists have mocked the idea of pulling Joe Biden left. I agree with that. Okay? Maybe you agree too. I think you would be correct to say that the left is not going to pull Joe Biden left. He's going to pull us right, just like he did with Bernie Sanders and whatever else, that may have been deliberate on Bernie's part, whatever. But the point is, the right pulls people right. You think that we, the left, who don't have any money or power, our real power is our labor, withholding it is our only real weapon, and we don't have an organized labor movement. Anywho, we don't have any organized power. And we don't really have any capital. That's, by definition, the proletariat doesn't have capital. We don't have leverage within capitalism. And you think we're going to pull them left more than they pull us right. Why? Because you're just that hard? No. It's because you think you're an exception, but you're going to find out, like I did, that you're not. They will pull you right. You will work for them unless you did what I did and figured that out and completely walk away, give them the finger, and say, fuck no, I'm not working for you, whether that's in a political coalition or in any other circumstance. The point is, the right pulls you right. You think you're going to pull them left? They want you to think that, because you're not going to pull them left. They're going to pull you right. You're going to offer yourself up, And they look and say, oh, look, some juicy labor to exploit. That's what they see. And then you're going to waste a lot of oxygen trying to talk to them about coming left. If they could even understand what you were saying, they would discard it, and they will immediately set to work on pulling you right. They try to co-opt and exploit. It's what they do. They are capitalists. And basically this whole libertarian project is yet another marketing pitch for capitalism to try to, give it another boost. It's like a Saturday morning TV show that is designed to sell toys. It is, it's just there to co-opt more people, and people who have fallen for it. Yeah, we can try to talk them out of it, but I mean, as socialists generally, we're trying to sell people on anti-capitalism and specifically socialism. This is really no different. Thinking that we can just embrace some subset of people who, under any other circumstances, we would just be trying to sell on socialism. I don't know. I guess I just don't see why anyone thinks that this particular group of people are any better a target than any other. Anyway, I'm going to call it here for part one. I'll take up, there's a few more comments on the same theme in part two. We're going to do that. But I'll leave you with two closing thoughts. One is, I think generally what we need to do as socialists is to become an appealing movement that people want to join. That's part of the reason why so many people were joining the Bernie Sanders campaign. I supported it for that reason. I thought that it was a place in a coalition where, everyone on the broader left could, for the most part, find something useful to do. And I thought it was great. Bernie fucked us all over really badly when he pulled out. I think that's a lot of what this is about. In fact, even specifically to Jimmy Dore, a lot of his madness started when Bernie fucked us over. And it's like it shattered Jimmy Dore's mind. For as much as he wants to talk about how Trump broke liberals' brains, and Democrats' brains, I feel like, the heartbreak of Bernie dropping out the way that he did, which was so shameful, sent fucking Jimmy Dore over the edge, where he's like, let's embrace libertarians now. We'll get you all you fucking, and that's not helpful. It's not any more helpful than just be sad about Bernie and accept that it was a big, huge waste, but don't change your basis of your politics based off of that. So we need somehow to find a way to bring the Bernie moment back, because if you actually want to build the left, then you build the left, not the fucking right. So becoming an appealing movement that people want to join. Forget this whole, we need to go one-on-one and convert all these people. Far more efficient, far easier is we make this an appealing movement people on their own want to join. That's to me the big point here. I'm just, why can we not do that? Let's do that. And again, though, this is a complicated question because we're still digging ourselves out from under mountains of anti-communist propaganda. So it's not an easy question to solve. Jimmy Dore up there, why aren't you offering an alternative vision to workers? Oh, I'm sorry, have you not heard of socialism before? We absolutely are. But, we just need to do what we can do to blanket the world in our propaganda and just make it as appealing as possible. Forget trying to win people over one-on-one. That's horribly inefficient. We need to be a movement that they want to join. And, but getting to that point where we don't compromise our politics in the process is, easier said than done for sure, or we would have done it already. So keep that in mind. The second thing is, for all the uniting with right-wing populists, I think we got a little bit of a preview of that with Trump. He didn't start any major new wars. Did you enjoy the last 4 years? I didn't. I mean, there were some pretty major setbacks for the working class. That's what you're going to get from any, air quotes, right-wing populist. Trump said he was going to give us all health care, for fuck's sake. They lie. I know this is, hard to hear, but right-wingers lie all the time. On that note, We'll catch you in the next video. And that's the video. Thanks to our current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen or just support us financially, you can go to patreon.com/socialism4all and sign up for a monthly donation. You can also follow us at facebook.com/socialism4all. Used to have a page at FOR all, and it got throttled to death by Zuck. Here on YouTube, please click the like button, subscribe button, and the notifications bell. Please leave a comment if you can, and please share our video wherever you're online, your Twitter feed, your Discord servers, Reddit subs, etc. All of that helps more people to see this content, whether it's in the YouTube algorithm or just posting it on other sites. All of that's helpful. All of you out there supporting and promoting this content makes it all go that much more smoothly. We need to end capitalism, normalize talking about socialism today, and it's really kind of our only hope for a better tomorrow. Thanks for all you do, and we will catch you in the next video.